So this is again, so I told you there are in the new syllabus there are 4 readings. This is the second one. This is on passive equity investing. Now, what do you understand by active versus passive? So is like passive investing same as buy and hold? No, if I buy some shares and if I just sit on them for 7 years, is that passive investing or active investing? Okay. In fact, I have a bigger question. So generally my style of investing is there are certain stocks that I have bought in my portfolio and I haven't sold them for years. Let's say there is a stock which is lying in my portfolio for last 6 years. I haven't sold it. I'm not planning on selling it. Am I an active investor or passive investor? Correct. So buy and hold does not automatically become a passive strategy. It's not that. It's what stocks I'm buying. Am I just saying that okay, Nifty or S&P 500 is very smart, I cannot outsmart them. So I simply go and buy the same stocks. Then it becomes passive. But if I think that I'm smarter, which I do, and I can buy stocks which might be able to do better than the index, S&P 500, Nifty, whatever it is, and then I try to select the stocks, then it becomes active. So now if this is what passive is, which is simply buying index, then why do we need an entire reading on passive equity investing? So because this is level 3. So in level 1 and level 2, they kind of put in all the nice topics. And then when they were writing level 3 curriculum, they fell short of topics. They said, okay, we have to write something on passive. So let's try to write something around it. So here is how the reading revolves around it. Then it talks about, fine, you're a passive investor. One of the biggest concern that you have is the tracking error. What is tracking error? Correct. Tracking error has like variety of different definitions, but on an average, the error try to measures the difference between what benchmark has earned versus what you have earned. So either like a proper difference or a standard deviation of these differences over a period of time. That's your tracking error. So how do you reduce the tracking error? So there is some discussion around the tracking error. Then there is some discussion on how do you reduce transaction cost. So now they talk about certain indexes. For example, there is one index built by the Chicago booth. I think it's called CSPR or something. It's an index built by that, that school for economic research. And that index is made of 4,000 stocks. So imagine if there is an investor who comes to you, he says, please take my money and put into this index. Replicate this index. Then how many stocks you'll have to buy? 4,000 stocks, correct? And that's going to incur a significant transaction cost, taxes. You're going to need a larger ticket size. So then, can you build some sort of a factor-based strategy? Instead of buying 4,000 stocks, can you buy 400 stocks and still have similar exposure to those 4,000 constituents? Correct? So stratification, factor-based strategy. So we'll have some discussion around that. This is more or less what the reading is about. Now I have a question for you before I get into nitty-gritties. What is your view on passive investing? How many of you are passively invested? How many of you, okay, let me simplify this. How many of you have bought ETFs here? What percentage of your portfolio is passively invested, Shiv? Okay, that's negligent. Okay, how about you? About 10%. Okay. And how about you guys? You're not believers in passive? How many of you are equity investors, by the way, here? All of you are equity investors, right? Did you understand what he said? He said, we have a trend in India which is similar to the trend that has been there in the US. Correct? So, which is, when we say ETF or a tracker, which company comes to your mind? Vanguard. Correct? Vanguard is probably the largest asset under management in the passive equity space. And the size of the Vanguard has grown phenomenally in the last few years. That tells us how big the ETF market is, how big the passive equity markets is. Correct? And then what Shiv said is a lot of investors have started to believe that maybe it's difficult to get that alpha in active. To a lot of investors, including me, even though I plan to be on the other side, but 2% hurts. I don't like 2%. I'll be honest about it. Even though if I launch a fund, I may charge, I might not charge, but I hate that 2%, because even though it looks 2%, in the long run it really kills you. In the long run, when that 2% compounds, that 2% kind of eats up a big part of your wealth. So a lot of investors have the same belief, and therefore those guys are moving towards ETFs. One of the biggest proponent of passive investments is one of the biggest appreciation for Vanguard has come from Warren Buffett. Now you'd be surprised. You'd say why? Because Warren Buffett is an active investor. We know that he buys stock. Then why is he proposing passive investments? So there's an interesting article I found online for you. We'll kind of have a look at it first. This is from Financial Times. I just took screenshots there. So he tells his wife, go cheap and passive. So WB issued some startlingly simple financial advice in the latest annual report, along with the extraordinary vote of confidence for the Vanguard, which is the company which makes those ETFs. Writing about the instructions laid on his will, he said his advice for the cash left to his wife was to put that into a passive fund. So the precise advice he gave, he said put 90% money into ETF and put 10% money into treasury bonds or treasury T-bills, so that you can take care of your expenses. So I suggest Vanguard's S&P 500 index fund. Adding that long-term results from this policy would be superior to those attained by most investors, including pension funds, institutions, individuals, employed high-fee managers. We've heard this multiple times. Warren Buffett has taken on a lot of big managers in the US. Right? He's criticized and he said that that fee that they charge is not worth it. The 2% fee that is being charged. This year's annual report. And the annual report or later? Later, huh? And that's why a lot of people don't like Warren Buffett these days. Of course, it's affecting hedge fund industry as well, because a lot of hedge fund managers have criticized Warren Buffett backwards because it's affecting their business. The money might not go to them. And then the same story here. Alright, so this is roughly the theme of reading. Let's get started.